Hey gang, how you doing out there? My name is Harmony Hart. Come on everybody, follow the bouncing heart and sing along to our theme song.
Open up all of the doors, my friend. You've got all the keys. Open up all of the doors, my friend. Come fun learning with me. Come fun learning with me.
Yes, welcome to Fun Learning. Today we're going to have a great time with Hysterical History and see gadgets galore, this mechanical age, spills and chills, cavalcade of girls, and the world of kids. So,
come fun learning with me.
The dying 19th century left in its wake a forlorn figure, Dobbin, the family horse, soon to be replaced by a fearsome monster that breathed fire and drank gasoline. In hundreds of U.S. towns at the century's turn, Dobbin's demise began with a magic lantern lecture by a traveling salesman. From the early steam cars onward, he told the history of mechanical transportation, a history culminating proudly in the horseless carriage. But many an earth-shaking event has low comedy beginning. In place of gasps of amazement, the intrepid lecturer oft reaped hoots and howls from his audience. For though by 1900 more than 40 automobile factories were already in operation, the noisy, smelly, dangerous toy cast hardly more of a shadow on the national scene than this wayward cat. It was a red-letter day when the first auto came to town. No superhighways yawned for the horseless marvel. As late as 1904, there were less than 150 miles of paved roads in all the United States.
Belching smoke, the thing careened off, out-snorting and out-rearing the most rambunctious stallion. Chauffeurs of the period, studying how to drive step by step from a book of instructions, often learned to start before they learned to stop. Runaway cars became as commonplace as runaway horses. The entire population ran madly behind shouting advice, every word of it wrong. Soon town and crowd were left in the rear, and the terrifying invasion of the countryside began. The embattled farmer greeted the car with an affection reserved till then for the drought and boll weevil.
Wait for me!
So the iron monster, cheered and jeered, loved and despised, cut a swath across rural America. And the rural America of trackless plains, impassable roads, and isolated farms was never again the same. The growing feud between horse owners and auto owners often erupted in match races. On such occasions, Dobbin frequently made his rival look sillier than ever. No one had invented the automobile. It had just grown like Topsy over the years, the work of many men. Early models weren't built for speed. If they got you where you wanted to go, that was miracle enough. Dobbin breezed home to triumph and disillusionment, for the interest of the crowd was not in the victor, but the vanquished. Silently, without even noticing, the parade passed by. Within 3 decades, the horse, man's chief means of transportation for centuries, was to vanish almost entirely from the nation's thoroughfares. And this was the beginning. Over Main Street was sweeping a wondrous change. By 1903, production of cars had reached a stupendous 9,000 a year. Begoggled drivers passed in polished metal splendor. There were some hitches, and most of the hitches were still to horses. Races between autos and horses became things of the past. Barney Oldfield, most famous of daredevils, pushed the record to a fabulous mile a minute and beyond. This is a dramatic reenactment with Oldfield himself reliving years later one of his great speed runs.
This is the real thing. Rare and authentic pictures of the Vanderbilt Cup race of 1906. New Yorkers departed at midnight to attend a contest which started at dawn, covered 100 miles of curved and rutted Long Island roads, and was so accident-ridden it had to be abandoned. By 1914, the year these scenes were taken, dirt track racing was a national sport. When wheels squirted off, as they often did, drivers kept on going. On dry days, dust was kicked into a blinding, choking, almost solid wall. But public interest was stimulated, and new developments tested amid the racetrack's dirt and danger. Altoona, Pennsylvania, they got rid of the dust by building a wondrous wooden saucer which became more oil-soaked and slippery with each passing year. Through the 1910s and 20s, the auto racing craze was at its height. Still bulky and unpredictable, automobiles seemed living things with personalities all their own. Like the horses before them, family cars and racers were given pet names, praised when they performed and soundly cussed when they didn't. 1911, the Indianapolis 500 zoomed off on a brick track while old-time cameras clanked. With time out for 2 world wars, this most famous of American auto races has been held every Memorial Day since. 1916 saw the birth of the Pikes Peak climb. Its course, this hairpin road, snaking in 12.5 almost perpendicular miles, 5,000 feet up the side of the mountain. Its purpose? To test not only a car's speed, but of more importance, its endurance. For it was the automobile's ever-increasing dependability that was rapidly putting the nation on wheels. More autos meant, alas, more accidents. A problem this inventor solved with a crash-proof bumper, only to discover he had also invented the world's most rapid exit. Another genius devised this supreme test. Kerplunked, flunked, junked. Back in 1916, cars came in every conceivable shape and size. There were 140 different U.S. manufacturers then. Today, there are 6. This Denver, Colorado street scene of 1919 shows that the traffic jam had come to stay. On New York's Fifth Avenue, also in 1919, the snarl led to the first traffic lights, complicated affairs operated by policemen in towers high above the hubbub. By 1920, 1 out of every 13 Americans owned a car. The success of the auto spurred inventors on to new achievements, like this locomotive car with smokestack and coal furnace, which all too quickly puffed into history. The torpedo car was designed to go 6 miles a minute if it didn't by accident sail straight off to Mars. Probably no vehicle ever looked so fast and went so slow. One inventor attempted to solve the problem of streamlining with the backwards car. He didn't cut down on wind resistance much, but boy, how he startled the other drivers. France's submarine car was supposed to travel not only on land, but on and under the water. And surprisingly enough, that is exactly what he did, cruising downward until only the smokestack marked its path. Oh, what a place to run out of gas. first novel of auto inventions was England's Dinosphere, which did away with the car entirely and just used a tire. The driver acted as an inner tube. What a position the blighter will be in if the thing has a blowout. Jawohl, science really much forward with Germany's rocket car. The first model ran on a track. There was, of course, one small problem. The smoke. Years pass in experiment and labor. A new rocket is unveiled. The smoke problem? Don't give it a thought. We've got that licked. The scientist never gives up. Years later, by increasing the rocket displacement, reversing the air intake with the Framus valve, and converting the upsilon to an alpha gamma and the fradenal biphenol, he's banished smoke forever. Oh well, back to work. Come around in 10 or 15 years for the next installment of Gadgets Galore.
Boy, I'm glad that smoke isn't up here. Hey, isn't this a fun way to look at history? That film was so silly. We've got another silly one, too. This one's called This Mechanical Age.
In this mechanical age, here is the saga of flight. Sleek, unearthly, all speed and fire, strange shapes sweep through the heavens. For thousands of centuries, man was earthbound. Yet in the few brief decades since his conquest of the air, he has created jet-propelled ships of the sky, capable of soaring 100,000 feet into the atmosphere, of spewing forth scores of rockets in a single deadly burst, of spanning oceans and continents as a matter of daily routine, of traveling 17,000 miles non-stop, of rising straight up or diving straight down, of hurtling through space at nearly 3 times the speed of sound, of beating the sun itself around our spinning globe. It all began at Kitty Hawk. A monument marks the spot where in 1903, 2 brothers named Wilbur and Orville Wright made history's first powered flight. Their achievement stirred men's souls. And in the wake of the Wright brothers came
The wrong brothers. One pioneer unveiled his parasol plane, built to fly the Pacific. It didn't. This Frenchman was content to pedal over Paris, but he could never quite raise the foot power. Winged bicycles were popular among inventors. Low running cost, and since they never got off the ground, perfect safety. In California, a beer barrel plane made mouths water, and this in the days of Prohibition. The principle was logical enough. You rose by scooping up the air like a bucket scoops up water. The era of the flapper called forth the flapper plane. You turned the crank and the blades revolved like a giant electric fan. Maybe it didn't go anyplace, but it was cool, man, cool. This Sky Leviathan could go anywhere, as long as you pulled it. Though its paddle wheel wings revolved wildly, the Gray Goose was merely a homing pigeon destined to remain back in its own backyard. In England, one aeronaut decided that no blooming sparrow was going to steal a march on him. Pushing the pedals makes the wheels turn and the wings flap up and down. The trouble with this contraption is that he'll have a Charlie horse long before he gets a close-up look at a cloud. Poised precariously on a Connecticut bridge, this inventor might become an eagle, but he has a better chance of becoming an angel. His bat wing special needs just one accessory, a towel.
Now, an awesome moment as the first rocket plane is fueled for a precedent-shattering flight. An asbestos-clad scientist lights the fuse, then runs for cover. There's no telling how far this revolutionary rocket ship may travel. Perhaps into outer space, perhaps to the very moon. With the first rocket mail years later, science marches on. Vast improvements have been made on the early primitive rocket. And now...
That's what happened to the letter you've been expecting. In Toledo, an inventive genius gets all juiced up to prove the hard way that every man can be his own rocket ship. And away we go. Rocket schmocket. Sam, you made the pants too hot.
In the early 20s, aeronauts strove to perfect a strange windmill on wheels called the helicopter. This French model flew for only a few precarious moments and never got as high as an elephant's eye. Yet its achievement was a new world's record and an important advance in aviation.
Pile for the wood, she's running wild. A pilot could easily lose his head if he ran in the wrong direction. Early helicopters were dangerous. Careful, men. Watch out for tricks. In Detroit, the first umbrella helicopter makes its bow. As light as lead and cast iron could make her, this undergrown carousel was supposed to jump into the air. Try this on your next hangover. Back in France, there appeared a new kind of copter driven by a pair of oversized pinwheels. This aerial bucking bronco had the stability of an intoxicated chorus girl and required a ground crew skilled in the 100-yard dash. A gas bag and a pilot were added for control. Some control. Just let her loose and where she goes, nobody knows. They called her the Flying Sausage, but to that perspiring ground crew, she was just a lot of baloney. This is how they got airsick back in 1921. Featuring the upsweep wing, this sturdy plane was designed for intercontinental flight. With luck, it might get across the street.
Here is the short story of the Seagull plane, which in the realm of flight was just successful enough to be a crashing failure.
In Germany, Otto Lilienthal bets on a sure thing by imitating the flight of birds, even the flapping wings and feathers. But when the swallows come back to Capistrano, Otto won't be along. Up in Maine, the wooden eagle is unveiled to a waiting world. Those who came to ridicule remain to watch in amazement as it flies to pieces.
Chicago produced the Ferris wheel plane, which is tied down securely to keep it from heading straight for the heavens. The motors respond with a mighty roar. What grace, what power, what speed, what design.
What a mess.
Smiling and confident, an English wizard flaps the ailerons of his reclining or divan-type one-man glider. The principle is supremely simple. When the car reaches airspeed, off you'll fly to whirl and loop happily overhead. The car races across the sands. The great event is close at hand. Faster, 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 and there he goes. I suppose you might call that hop a flop.
Mr. Sauvin of France has invented an absolutely safe glider. Mr. Sauvin believes in safety. Look at the spot he's picked to try it out. So long, Mr. Sauvin. Oh, well, guess it needs a few minor adjustments. This you'll have to see to believe. That glider's made of rubber, and in a moment you'll find out why. The harder it hits, the quicker it snaps back into shape. And the pilot didn't even get mussed.
A fitting climax to our study of aviation's also-rans is the 7-layer plane. With 7 wings and a fast man at the pedals, it should be able to fly 7 times as high. For the trial run, a couple of wingmen provide history's first jet-assisted takeoff. Now, the big moment. That's all there is. How could there be more?
It looks like man has been trying to fly for a long time. And speaking of flying, take a look at this guy in Spills and Chills.
First flight, man has used the airplane for 2 purposes: to get him places at incredible speed and to provide him with the greatest of all thrills, the defiance of the law of gravity. Today, in an era of jet planes and world-circling hops, the spirit of the old-time barnstormer, who thrived when flying was a novelty, is far from dead. It exists at every air show, when men still bet their lives on their own coordination and the infallibility of a throbbing machine. It exists at air races, too, where pilots make the same wager and sometimes lose. But for the real flavor of barnstorming, we must turn back to the 1910s and early 1920s. The newsreel cameraman, balancing precariously on old chicken wire and canvas crates, was as much a daredevil as the daredevil himself. In those days, rickety planes, many from World War I, were used for every conceivable kind of stunt. Here, high above Manhattan, one becomes a prize ring. What a place to land a haymaker. Bathing beauties, too, took to the airways. Imagine the present Miss America making a dive like this. In this period of flaming youth, no young lady was more daring than 19-year-old Lillian Boyer. Lillian thought nothing of hanging by her feet. Then, as the wind whipped about her, by a single foot. Up there with the earth thousands of feet below and no parachute, Miss Boyer might decide to do anything. She's hurtling into space. Now it's, look, Mom, no hands, as she hangs by her teeth. One of the most popular tricks in the early movies was the transfer from souped-up car to slowed-down plane. At 70 miles an hour, it wasn't easy. Here's a fellow with a lot of drag. On the Barnstormer's airliner, the lower berth wasn't too comfortable. When a daredevil went for a joyride, his view of the scenery looked like this. Because the cockpit might be stuffy, he often rode the wheels. As the plane lands with the ground rushing up to meet him, the stuntman waits until the last split second before pulling himself to safety. The ancient spirit of daredevilry, reborn with the birth of the plane, seemed to fan out into other fields as well. Balloon riders preferred to go straight up, to perform their acrobatics dangling from the bottom of a gas-filled bag. These 5 gentlemen chose the quick way down. They use parachutes, but just to prove they're not sissies, they land in the water, heavy gear and all. But everything's under control. They've got one boat to pick them all up. Back in the roaring 20s, daredevils started young. Mildred Unger was 10 years old when she put away her dolls to go joyriding, standing upright on top of a big balloon. On her swaying perch, the little girl headed skyward without even a guy rope to grasp. Californians shuddered as she drifted 2,000 feet above Los Angeles, but Mildred thought the ride was fine. A human being can stand only nearly so much wear and tear unless he's one of the indestructible men. Take this Texan who's dragged in a straitjacket behind a car at 40 miles an hour. The idea is to remove the jacket before friction removes the seat of your pants. Some like it cold. New Jersey's Eddie Jameson's right at home when he's inside an ice cake like a frozen herring for hours at a time. Others prefer it hot. The inside of a steel box can seem pretty airless, unless, of course, you're used to riding the subways. This appears to be going a bit too far. Talk about a hot foot. The cover comes off and out bounces the great Marvelo. A little oven-baked, but otherwise just dandy. Here's another character who likes to play with fire. A trick like this one makes some stuntmen feel good, but it makes him feel like the devil. Meet a latter-day Hercules who has his own remedy for breaking up a chest cold. The men really get into the swing of things. Hercules is hopeful that the slab of concrete breaks before he does. Whoops, hold it. Yes, sir, it's sometimes hot work being an indestructible man. Human flies are perfectly destructible, but they don't seem to know it, as they dangle in midair with their heads in the clouds and their feet in a crack on the side of a skyscraper. This gentleman took his morning warm-up on a narrow cornice while performing for war relief in World War I. It's amazing how much pep you have after just a few exercises. Back in 1917, when it was considered patriotic to wear bunting, J.P. Linthicum got so good at scaling buildings that he tried it blindfolded. While the crowd gasped, Linthicum scrambled up the sheer face of a 14-floor structure entirely by his sense of feel. When some human flies get to the top, the thrills are just beginning. Here's a handstand high above Broadway and a stuntman who loses his balance. Daredevil Johnny Reynolds tries a game called teeter-totter. Johnny is 39 years old. With luck, he may someday be 40. There's no trick to jumping rope, unless you decide to do it on a plank sticking out of a 20-story building. What a place to go into your dance. If the anchor man stepped off the end of that board, this act would come to a sudden conclusion. Now the blindfold test. Look out! You've got to have a strong mind to pull a stunt like this. At a dizzy height, this fellow breaks into the movies by walking along a narrow, slippery girder on a pair of stilts. Watch a sudden gust of wind blow off the daredevil's hat and almost blow off the daredevil. In this era of wonderful nonsense, where mountain goats feared to tread, you could always find a stuntman. This is good for the arches, but not the nerves. Every one of us has the fear of falling from high places. That's why, for spectacular thrills, it's hard to beat the human flies. Bridge acrobats prefer to do their work over the water. This Frenchman picks a span rising 200 feet above the Seine. That's 65 feet higher than the Brooklyn Bridge. He goes through his stunts, then slowly as in a nightmare, his feet slip from the trapeze. Mr. Coffee Nerves isn't even jarred. Ho, ho, ho. Another bridge, another jumper. Notice how the acrobat waves his arms to guide his hurtling body. In a dive like this, you've got to land just right to live. Of all the daredevils, the ones that take the biggest risks are the CRACKUP champions. They'll tackle anything to the tune of crumbling stone, splintering wood, tearing metal, and shattering glass. locomotives come thundering head-on at full throttle. That's all, brother. That's the top in spills and chill.
Ouch, that hurts. Hey gang, don't you go trying anything that you just saw in this last film, okay? Here we go now with Cavalcade of Girls.
When a new century was born in 1900, woman's place was in the home. Few sports and few jobs were considered ladylike enough for her attention. The amply padded and well-corseted young woman who strolled in New York's Easter Parade of 1903 was supposed to be a companion, not a competitor to man. The fashions of the infant century were daring compared to those of the century before. These aren't lady gangsters with submachine guns, but lady hunters in startling Paris hunting costumes, which probably scared away all the game. For motoring, designers created the trouser skirt. Watch closely for a glimpse of a well-turned ankle. During the 1910s, Congress got its first woman representative. Her name was Jeanette Rankin. Mrs. Theodore Roosevelt, wife of the former president and a leader in the Girl Scout movement, posed for her only newsreel appearance. With Europe at war, Sarah Bernhardt toured America. Asking aid for France, the divine Sarah displayed the fire that made her the greatest actress of her day. Soon the U.S. entered the conflict, and overnight the American girl was transformed from Alice Sit by the Fire to Miss Casey Jones. As the men marched off to war, the women exchanged their flowing skirts for overalls and took over even the toughest jobs. We had lady lumberjacks, and lady steeplejacks, and lady sign painters. The nation would never be the same again, and neither would its women. Donning uniforms, they pitched directly into the fight for democracy. New York cheered its head off when Red Cross and Army nurses, 25,000 strong, paraded down Fifth Avenue. General Pershing himself presented the Distinguished Service Medal to these nurses for heroism on the field of battle, and even took their picture. Women's fashions reflected her new independence. Bare-armed, bare-kneed bathing suits appeared on the beaches, well, most beaches. The glamour girl of the 1910s captured male hearts with dazzling creations, such as this. Furs were really furs. The little wraparound number is of ermine with trimmings of mole. Here's a cape and muff of Russian sable. This Tending Tonight model is of chinchilla. It cost $6,500 and was cheap at the price. The Battle of the Suffragettes raged on 2 continents. In London, bobbies carted the fabulous Mrs. Pankhurst off to jail, but she kept on demonstrating for women's right to vote. In America, the suffragettes carrying parasols marched on the U.S. Capitol. Lillian Russell, a living legend as the belle of the gay 90s, now in middle age, lent her support. And women got the vote after a long fight against prejudice and ridicule. The ladies had a right to celebrate. Dances across the nation reflected the final bursting of bonds loosened during World War I. Once it had been a waltz. Now it was the shimmy. By the 1920s, women were more than ever earning their way in jobs formerly reserved for men. New York even got lady policemen, a formidable force, which, though its main job was directing traffic, could doubtless make any criminal blanch. There was a new breed abroad in the land, the woman aerial daredevil. Her motto seemed to be, anything a man can do, I can do better. The dauntless little lady is Mabel Cody. Gladys Ingle used shackled ankles and a hook for her hair-raising transfers from plane to plane. Most amazing of all was 10-year-old Mildred Unger, who got right into the spirit of the Roaring '20s by doing the Charleston 2,000 feet up. A few years earlier, no woman would think of changing attire. Now, Gladys Ingle did it the hard way, carrying a whole wheel aloft. Imagine transferring planes while hanging onto a heavy wheel. Gladys proceeds with the job. You'd expect a Lady Hercules, but despite the grease stains, she still managed to look frail, feminine, and even coy. Fashions were more daring than ever. Stockings for bathing on their way out in 1922 were soon to go the way of the bustle. Grandpa, still ogling the ladies, had less to look at, for the flapper had traded curves for that boyish figure. But she still got a kick out of a loving cup. As for street fashions, the world had never before seen anything like them. Short skirts and misplaced waistlines would have become symbols of a rip-roaring age of flaming youth, prohibition, and Coolidge prosperity. Posed on a roof, the contest winner could show her boyish bob. Gambling ships anchored just outside the 3-mile limit found that women were among their best customers. They catered to girls with it who called themselves the lost generation and considered it smart to be daring. Other high-flying young ladies of the 20s danced in the clouds above a world which momentarily had little to worry about. Helen Wills was the queen of sports. Her sizzling brand of tennis won 7 singles championships at home and 7 abroad. Daddy Browning and his 16-year-old bride Peaches had marital difficulties and gained fame as the darlings of the tabloids. Pretty, vivacious Ruth Elder became the first woman to fly across the Atlantic. Her monoplane was aptly named the American Girl. Texas Guinan reigned over the nightclubs. She called her customers suckers, and they loved it. During the turbulent 30s, bathing suits dwindled with the national income, and hemlines tumbled down with the stock market. Like many another fad of the temporary 20s, exposed knees became just a memory. Princess Eugenie hats were pulled down over one eye. Big veils had a brief vogue. Some girls cut their hair short, and some piled it up high. From Norway came a young and pretty figure skater named Sonja Henie to whirl away with the Olympic championship. There was a fabulous career ahead for the graceful Sonja. Mrs. Franklin Roosevelt, the first lady of the land, traveled everywhere and became an important part of the American scene. Amelia Earhart, the beloved Lady Lindy, flew the Atlantic alone. On a world-circling flight 5 years later, she disappeared forever. The fateful 40s brought World War II. Wax and waves marched off to serve with the men. Under fire on the shell-riddled Anzio beachhead, Army nurses worked around the clock. Outfitted with fatigue clothes and helmets, they dug in with the rest. But through it all, they remained women. In war plants, on endless assembly lines, the ladies fought the battle of production. And like their mothers before them in World War I, they went to work on the railroads. The post-war period brought the bikini bathing suit and some other more conservative models, which announced to the world that curves were really back. After a half-century of progress and service, the ladies were more feminine than ever, and their fashion showed it. Climbing to a position of equality with men, women had broadened their horizon so that now it ranged from high fashion to professional sports. Lady baseball leagues packed them in from coast to coast. Even the bone-jarring sport of football had to make way for the ladies. They took the game in their stride and played it well. When the girls went in for wrestling, mere man could be glad he was in his seat and not in the ring. roller derby, in which she was governed by the same rough and tumble rules as the men, the fantastic female became $1 million sports attraction. Women of 1900 would look with amazement at their great-granddaughters of today, but leave it to the ladies to provide a sock ending for this half-century's cavalcade of girls.
They're just acting, gang. They're not really hitting one another. Listen, we've got a film now for kids, and it's called The World of Kids.
Lights out, kids. Start the show. In these news flashes from the world of kids, let's start at the very beginning. Here's a young victim of a housing shortage. Despite his early age, he's already gone to the dogs. Don't be too hasty, fellas. Save one ear for supper. Now let's turn to a more important news flash. In fact, you couldn't get more important than Christmas. Everything starts out peacefully enough, and then somehow the toys get out of hand. As everywhere else in the world of kids, movies mean fun and entertainment. Here, under the direction of cameraman Charlie Moore, a company is filming a cap pistol epic. In the old Wild West, things were mighty rugged, partner. Fry rodeo, they ride tall in the saddle, and although the cowpunchers may be junior, the Spills are senior size. Don't forget your hat. That steer can't intimidate you, son. Look him straight in the eye. This fellow may be a tough cowpoke, but he's still Daddy's little boy. If there are any duffers in the audience, we'd advise them to close their eyes. They're going to feel mighty small after watching these guppy-sized golfers in action. Some of the youngsters are scarcely bigger than the tees, but brother, can they wallop that ball. On the final hole, this championship match really gets hot. The golfer who can beat little Oscar, however, well, he hasn't been born yet. When tiny 10-pin titans tangle, the excitement's enough to bowl you over. This is the only bowling tournament where the pins weigh more than the contestants. Herman seems a bit overconfident. By gum, he's right. Okay, Herman, applaud all you want to. In this demonstration of the manly art of self-defense, somebody forgot to bring along the men. It's Battling Benny versus Walloping Walter in a bout that quickly comes to a shattering climax. Up and at him, Slugger. He went that away. Here's another flea-weight thriller. The only trouble these diminutive Dempseys have with their feet is staying on them. Presenting the blindfold test with enough wild swings to churn up a hurricane. Willie has just got to clinch. Mom, you made the pants too wide. If it's football you're after, try the Pablum Bowl, where Army and Navy are battling it out. Now a touchdown run by that grand old Army team, the PS-38 Army, that is. The ball goes to the Navy's ferocious Ferdinand, most elusive football star in America, under 50 pounds. A sizzling Navy pass sails to completion. It's a glorious victory for the battling Navy of PS-93. At the Little League World Series, it's the kids who charge onto the field and the adults who do the peeking through knotholes. Here's a play at first. The umpire says, "You're out," and the crowd says, "Boo!" A solid hit sends 2 runs galloping home on this diamond, which is 2/3 big league size. That spells victory for the New Jersey Nine. In their dugout, delirium breaks loose. But, oh, somewhere kids are laughing. They're winning praise and fame. But there is no joy for these kids. Florida lost the game. Each year, the Soapbox Derby pits daredevil drivers in sleek cars that have all the latest improvements, except motors. Down the slanting speedway they roll at a burning 30 miles an hour. One racer swerves out of control. This derby has a bang-up finish. Add motors, and you've got an infant Indianapolis. These girls and boys must have started driving in engine-powered cradles. Now they're off to swerve, skid, and jockey for position around a dirt track like hard-bitten veterans. Look who sharpshooter Bob Foster's got for a target. Yep, it's Dad. Here's one tribulation of parenthood that most of us never even thought of. Does your cigarette taste different lately? At Sun Valley, skiers come in all sizes. This is the small trial size, slipping by in the slalom. In the ski jump, the youngsters grab themselves a handful of sky, and sometimes a seat full of snow. Take away the snow, add some water, and you've got the specialty of 4-year-old Nye Orsi Jr. In the water baby department, scientists of the slippery springboard compete for the Belly Whopper Championship. Look at the prize. Meet diving star Jack Pylan Jr. Head up, Jackie, low bridge. Jackie has been diving since he was 9 months old. This is how far practice will get you by the time you're 1. The 22-foot board. Why, 4-year-old Bubber Tange uses that just for warming up. Here's what Bubber calls a dive, 33 feet from high chair to the wet blue yonder. The smaller they are, the more graceful they fall. The kid's CANDID camera goes to a performance of Punch and Judy, where hidden from view it records some uninhibited reactions. Punch and Judy work with might and main, but it's the kids who steal the show. Was exciting. Now the candid camera catches the poignant story of childhood's first haircut. Babette is in full cry, and that doesn't reassure the other kids one bit. No, it doesn't hurt, but it's awfully lonely in that big barber's chair. Shirley would rather part with her dolls than those curls. Horrors, who's next? There now. Thank goodness it's all over. Our cameraman couldn't stand it another second. And so, through a veil of tears, we bid a fond farewell to the world of kids.
Well, gang, I hope you had a good time, and I hope you learned something, too, about history. Come on back and see me again for some more fun learning. And remember, treat other people the way you want to be treated, okay? I've got to go now. Bye-bye.